really common thing you go through, as a developer or as a designer. Someone comes to you and says, "Hey, can you build this for me?" And you go, "All right. How do I break this down, and what are the visual elements and whatnot?" This is kind of what we're going to do today. We're going to try and do it in the next 2-3 hours. So for those watching on YouTube, that's kind of the timeline. Excellent. So I'm gonna jump ahead and actually start a new project in VS Code. So a lot of people ask me what code editor I use. It's a free one. You can download it yourself. I highly recommend using it. And note that is a VS for it's V, like vase, not a B for Bob. So I'm going to come in here and just go into code mentoring projects. Create a new folder. Call this UI breakdown. Open it up. So we've got a fresh project in front of us. Nothing up my sleeve. Okay. So this is kind of what we're going to be looking into today. This particular image, just a random one I found on Dribble. So what have we got? Who can tell me how initially we might think about breaking this down? And for those who are not on mute and typing, just make sure you put yourself on mute because we can hear your keyboard. So what do we have here? What are some of the visual elements that we group together? How are we gonna? What's the skeleton of this website? This is the first question that I ask myself when I'm looking at any design.
So you've got a top nav with links.
Yep. So why don't we copy this, take it into Figma. We'll start drawing boxes and squares over things to get a bit of a sense. And again, apologies for the computer running so slowly, team. It's Firefox recording seems to be very average. Close some of these down. So, paste it in here. Like Cal said, we have, some kind of header like this. Move that. Just give it a red border. So we've got this kind of thing, right? We might even have another one inside, right? For this kind of thing, we're going to have some kind of separator, or maybe it's, maybe you've got two. Maybe you've got like this. So what I'm doing here, team, is I'm dissecting this page. I'm thinking about how we're going to lay it out, what components are going to belong. We might have another one kind of comes down like this, comes down to that line. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's like a faint background difference between the two of these things here. So, in fact, I'd probably make this whole thing a section. All right, for those asking about semantic HTML, I'd create this as a section. Just annotate that. Section. A section here. We might make this a header. All right, these are the HTML elements that we'll use. And for the beginners, right, for those who are just new to coding, have a Google of what these things are. We're going to jump into some code soon, but this is kind of the overall thing. Now, who knows what we'd use typically for this kind of thing here, right? This navigation system. We've got two common options.
Flex or grid.
That's great from a CSS perspective, but what about from a HTML semantic perspective?
nav tag?
Nav tag. All right. So nav, you used to use an unordered list. So a nav will work pretty well. So in that case, right, this nav, we actually want to incorporate both of them. So we might have the nav reaches out to all of them, like this. Oops. The nav reaches all of them, but then each of these, this might be one section, and this might be another section. Paste those styles. Oh, it's not working. So we need to divide those two up into different parts. All right. I'll just change that color to make it easier to see. So we can just very easily use a div for each of these. Again, I'm just going to ask you guys, if you're not talking, just put yourself on mute because I can hear some keyboards. Just for those who are listening. What else have we got? So we've got this section here. Whatever this is. It's card section. So we break that up. We've got this section as well. Come on. This one here. It's gonna have a couple of things in it. We put all our text in that. All right. We've got this other little section, this floating thing around this. So that we'll probably just set that as an SVG image. It'll just be one element. And then we've also got this quotation section sitting out over here. And then we've got these, this would be another section. And when I say section in this one, I actually mean like a HTML, CSS, so a HTML section. So that would be another one. And then, you know, as the page scrolls down, this design doesn't include it, but as we scroll down the page, you know, you have the footer and various other things. Cool. And then we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty around each of these. Now unfortunately, we probably won't be able to extract these icons because these are quite nice looking. But as you can see, this is a static image, right? This is a PNG. I just pulled this off the web, so I don't have the ability to ask the designer for these assets. So we'll do the best we can with what we've got, but you know, realistically, we don't have these icons. So to keep it simple today, I am probably not going to jump too much into, you know, crazy CSS frameworks or anything like that. In fact, we might even just use Sass for this, just so we get some of the nesting. So yeah, I'm not gonna build it with Webpack or React or anything. I'm just gonna keep this really, really simple, just so we can focus on how we go from, you know, this design into code, and less about, you know, the coding system and whatnot. But any questions on anything we've covered, or how we've broken this down, or anything you guys think we need to be aware of? What do you guys think? Anything else we've forgotten?
Yeah, Tristan, like maybe on the browser, if we can see how it looks on mobile, how it's gonna look on tab.
So that's another question, right? Is actually turning this into responsive. So that's actually more of a design question, and we don't really have time for that today, unfortunately. But that is a good topic that we could do maybe next Saturday, is taking a pre-existing design and turning it into mobile. But that is something to consider. But I think it's out of scope for what we're doing today.
Maybe for the handful of absolute beginners, just to take a step back and just give them context. This is basically a website concept image we found online, and it's been imported into a design tool, which is Figma in this case. And we're blocking out the areas in the design concept.
Yeah,
you can use any tool. Could be Photoshop, but Figma is useful because it's built for this. Yeah,
Figma's. I mean, you can actually print it and draw it out by hand. It's more about our process of thinking from going from design to code, right? This is I personally don't really do this in real life. This is what I do in my head. So I'm just trying to give you guys a bit of an illustration into how I can convert. This used to be my job, right? I used to have the responsibility of taking a design and turning it into code in an agency as quickly as humanly possible, and it was hard, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I often made mistakes. And you'd think something was done, and you'd come back to the design. The designer would come back, and a list as long as your arm, saying, here are all of these things that are incorrect and these pixels that need to be moved around. And that's how I learned how to do this. So, it takes time and practice, and hopefully, drawing it out in Figma, like Cal was saying, like this is beneficial for you guys. And that's a good point for those who are completely new to HTML and CSS. Today might be a little bit complicated. I'm going to try and go slow, but definitely come along to one of the Wednesday sessions if this feels a little bit over the top. And I do apologize if it's a bit too much. Cool. So let's go ahead and actually jump into some coding, unless anybody has any other questions or things they want to talk about. All right, who's excited? I'm excited. This is actually a really nice design, so I'm excited to jump into this. Cool. So where do we start? How do we start with coding this? All right. How do we actually do this? So I'm going to come into the code. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. I'm going to create a file. So just right click, new file. I'm going to call this index.html. Okay. So again, this is using VS Code. You can use any text editor that you want, but you'll actually see why we use VS Code and how useful it is. So for those who don't know this, you can actually, in HTML, if you just press exclamation mark and then press tab, it will actually generate a whole bunch of code for you. So for the beginners, right? I think Lauren was one of them. This is HTML. This is what HTML looks like. Again, explaining HTML is probably a little bit out of scope for today's discussion, but if you have any questions, let me know. We can try and help you out. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at our root level sections. So what I often do is I go from what I call global, so look at the global scope, to specific. So I start large, and then I zoom in, right? For those who are on my talk on Wednesday, the Russian dolls analogy. Right, what's the biggest Russian doll? And then slowly opening them up and coming into like this small nitty-gritty individual things that we have here, right? Like these tiny things. So the largest section, or rather the largest element that we're going to have is this section element, right? So we've got two here. We've got the top section, we've got this bottom section. So let's go ahead and create those. So to get into some semantic HTML, I'm going to use the section tag like this. So this is going to be the section, and we'll call this the title, right? So we've got this placeholder. We've also got the section. What's this contain? This is the, let's call this the features, right? Section.features. Right. So what I'm actually going to do before I do any CSS is I'm actually going to get all of the elements on the page. before we start styling them. Right? So this is an important step for me personally. This is just how I like to do it, because it makes me go, all right, once the HTML's done, I don't need to add anything else. I can just leave that be. Maybe I add a couple of classes here and there, but I want to try and keep the HTML as clean as possible. I don't want to modify my HTML to actually add styles or, have like breaks or weird things. I just want it to have a really nice, clean structure, because this document, right? The browsers don't know, Chrome and Google and these search engines and stuff. They don't actually know how to interpret CSS. They know how to show it and make it look beautiful, but as far as the information is concerned, what they're really interested in is the actual HTML, because the HTML determines the document structure and the actual content. So we want to make sure that the content is organized in a really clean manner that's easy and semantic for browsers and search engines to index. So that's why I start with HTML and focus on that so much. So we've got this section. We're going to have this header in the title, like this. We know we're going to have a nav. And inside the nav, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 links. All right, they're all going to go to different things. So the first one's bank system. Second one is features. Now these are drop downs. So we probably won't build out the drop downs today because it'll take too long. How it works. We can do a drop down a different day if you guys want. Got about. We've got contact. We've got space, and then we've got login. Space. And then we've got get started. Now, for those who are new to this, right, you might be saying, but Tristan, these look different, right? This is a button. This one's blue. These are links. Like, why are you using the same anchor class, right? Or the anchor element or link? Why are you using the same thing for all of them? Right, who can tell me why? Why are we using the same type of element for each of these things? For those who are confused, I'm talking about everything inside these green boxes right now. Anybody have any ideas?
Each one is its own.
Looks like that guy.
Sorry, 2 people were just talking then.
Go on, Shane.
Yeah, I wonder if everyone looks like that guy.
Right, a bit confused.
Is it because everything is its own individual link? Like you want to have them selectable by their...
That's correct. They're all links, right? They're all going, like, assuming that these aren't drop downs, right? We'll just pretend that they're not. They all do the same thing. They're all links. They're styled differently, but from a HTML perspective, right, they don't change. They all do the exact same thing. I click on this and it takes me somewhere. So that is the behavior of a link. So therefore, we're going to use links for all of them. Now, we'll come in here and we go, actually, we know that these are the same, like in here, but these two are different. So what we can do is we can add some classes to differentiate them inside our CSS so that when we're styling them, we have a way of accessing them. So the last one, we'll add a class of class equals, and we'll call this text button, btn text. All right. We'll just call this class equals btn. We'll just call it primary color, because blue seems to be the primary color. Now I'm not using a CSS framework in this. We can eventually add that if we want to, but I don't want to confuse it with you guys and say, oh, I don't know this framework yet. I'm actually going to build it from scratch, if that's okay. Okay, so we've got that's kind of this first part done, right? from a HTML perspective. There's nothing new here. So what else have we got? We've got this section here. So what should we use to wrap everything in this wrapper? I would honestly probably just use a div, realistically. I don't think there's need for anything more semantic than that. It's not an article. It's not a main. It's not any of these things. It's just a. It's not really an aside, because an aside from a semantics perspective, says this is like a sidebar or something that's not relevant to the main piece of content. But this is the main piece of content, even though it's sitting on the side, right? So this is kind of coming back to what I was saying before, is thinking about the information as opposed to the actual style, because the information from an SEO perspective is more important. So I'm just going to use a div to wrap this stuff around it. We'll call it a wrapper, right? So as a sibling, we'll go dot wrapper. Now we've got this finance products thing here. So what should we call this? Let's use a span dot with a class of intro or pill. Right, it's typically a pill kind of looking thing. From a design perspective, we call this a pill. A pill is like a they kind of look like pills that you take, right? That you eat, like a medicine pill. You get this rounded kind of looking thing. So we'll call that a pill. Right, span.pill. And inside here, we'll put financial products or finance products. Right, now you'll notice I actually put down this as lowercase, whereas in the CSS, it's uppercase. Sorry, in the style, it's uppercase. We can change that with CSS, so we don't have to worry about that. So who knows what I'd be using for this here? What element should be used for this?
H1.
H1. Why do we use a H1? Why is a H1 important from a semantic SEO perspective?
The web crawlers can read it, right?
Yeah.
Just changes.
So we were talking before about on Wednesday night for those who are, on Thursday night for those who are part of this discussion. We're talking about hierarchy. That was one of the 10 points that a lot of developers don't get right in their designs. This page has excellent hierarchy. In fact, let me just go back to the one that doesn't have all the annotations on it. Right, this has good hierarchy. You can see, this is the most important piece of information going down the page. Second sort of level heading. We might use this as an aside, actually. This is a good case for an aside. So that's sitting on the side over there. So a H1 is really important. Don't have more than one H1 on the page. That's an important thing, team. If you're going to have anything like this one here, we'll use a H2. This one here, our features, we'll use a H3. But don't have more than H1 on the page, because it will confuse the SEO. So that's just a tip for you guys. So H1, let's say, add, it's not even correct English, add card to anyone, and interest from anywhere. I'm going to update this, add a card for anyone. Right. Then the next line says earn interest from anywhere. Okay. Now you'll notice that we've actually got this break in between. So some of you hear me complaining about the use of the break tag. This is the perfect case for it, because we want this to be forced to the new line. That's what a BR is used for. It is not used for adding margins and spacing. So especially those who are new, right? Don't use the break tag, the BR tag, to add space between things. It's forcing, because see how this earn, right, could actually sit here. It actually there is enough room for it to live there. So it will if we don't add that break. But the break says push it to the new line. The other option is to actually use a new element for it, but we don't want to do that because we want it to all be part of the same H1.
Does the BR need a...
All right, so then he's got a slash? No, it doesn't. That's actually not needed anymore. So that's a HTML5 thing. It doesn't matter. But if you want to be semantic, sure. Cool. Any other questions on anything we've covered so far?
So what did you say we used for the spacing? I know you said you weren't going to go through it, but if you could just like quickly show what's used for
spacing. Are you talking about?
I guess I've been using bad practices.
Are you talking?
BR tag.
Yeah. So this is the practical use. In that we have something here, and then just to simulate this, what it looks like in the code, right? We don't want this living on a new line. We actually want it to force it on the next line. So that is the use case for a BR tag.
Yes. I know. Yeah, I know the BR tag for that in terms of new line, but then you're saying not to use it for spacing. So what's the element that you use for that?
Yeah, you don't use any elements for spacing. You use CSS.
Okay.
And we'll get into that. But that's it. I'm really glad you brought that up. I actually don't know who's talking, so I apologize.
Andrew, sorry.
Andrew, thanks, Andrew. No, Andrew, that's a really great point, and thank you for bringing that up, because it's a very common mistake that a lot of junior developers make inside their HTML is they modify the document to suit styling. Right? Here's maybe a frame for you to think about this. Your HTML, right, you should be able to pick your HTML up and apply it to any style. Your HTML document should have nothing to do with the style itself. Now, obviously, that's an exception with the classes, right? But the actual semantics of your HTML, you shouldn't be adding elements and things in there to fix the styles or to adjust the styles. Now, sometimes you have to have some grouping elements and whatnot, but I try to keep the HTML as simple and as clean as possible. I should be able to read this document like I'd read a piece of text and understand exactly what it's doing, because that is what that's what the SEO is doing, right? It's looking through this thing. It doesn't know how to read CSS or interpret. Now, actually, I'm actually kind of telling you a lie. That's kind of changing these days with Google and whatnot, but it has a lot more precedence on the actual interpretation of a HTML document. So when you start adding things in here, like, different BRs, like for example, adding a space between, if we added spaces between here to create an extra thing, like some people might add like an extra anchor tag to add more. It's just, it messes up the document and it makes it very unclean. It's kind of dirty. So we don't want to do that with these documents, and that's a very common thing I see with a lot of junior developers with the BR element, specifically the BR element, is don't use the BR for space. Use it to break. That's what it stands for. Break the line. So hopefully that answers your question, Andrew.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool, awesome. Any other questions, team, on what we've done so far?
The bus should be outside of the header.
Say that again.
I think so. You have the wrapper class in the header. I think it should be outside of the header.
Ah, thank you. Good spotting, Tamoya. Yes, you're very right. That should not be living in the header. What else, team? Any questions that we covered on anything we covered so far? I'm going to add this link down here. All right. So I'm also going to add that to the wrapper. So I'm going to have the a.btn primary, and it has the get started, it's free. All right. What else? So we've got go back to our Figma. All right, we've got this guy here. Now we could actually turn this into a picture, but we might say, actually, we want more flexibility with this. We might want to animate it. We might want to have something where you hover over it and it shows you some cool things, or maybe it's dynamic. So we might actually do this in code. So we've got this wrapper. We've got this image here. Let's just call this shapes. I'm going to add that in later as a source. What else have we got? We've got this aside. I'll get to the cards in a second because they're going to be a little bit more complicated. So who can tell me what we're going to use for the aside? What HTML elements should we use? I'm talking about this one here on the right hand green box. Anybody have any idea?
Deep.
I didn't quite catch that one. Deep?
Yes.
I'm not sure what element you're referring to.
I think
A
she
div
meant
element?
div.
Yeah, I'm missing that one. We're going to use one called block quote. So this is the perfect situation, right? This is exactly what we're doing. You have a look here, right? We've got some text. We've got someone who said it. We're using a footer element as well. And we're also using the cite. So the cite is a citation. Right? In this case, it's Francis Chandler. Or digital designer, perhaps. So this is exactly what we're going to use. We've got a block quote. We've got a cite. In this case, I don't think we're citing. I don't think we're going to link anywhere with this. So we might decide to exclude this. We're going to have a paragraph element, which is going to contain this text. And then in the footer, right, in this case, they don't have a profile picture, but we'll have a profile picture here. We'll have her name, and we'll have the citation of digital designer. So does that make sense, team? Any questions on this? For those who are talking about semantic HTML, so HTML block quote indicates that the enclosed text is an extended quotation. Right? Usually this is rendered visually by indentation. A URL for the source of the quotation may be given using the cite attribute, while a text representation of the source can be given using the cite element. Right. So let's go ahead and actually copy this, and we'll put this in our code. In fact, because block quotes typically tend to be on the side, we're actually going to remove this aside element. We don't need it. Semantically, this is actually good enough. Now, in the paragraph, we had the lorem. So I'm just going to get some lorem into some text. Might make that a little shorter. Right. We've got Francis Chandler. Frances, oops. Frances Chandler. And then she's the designer. Right. Cool. So we've got that. I also forgot to add a paragraph to this guy here. So I'm going to add this paragraph in as well. Again, just lorem ipsum text. Okay. So we've got these quotation. We've also got these quotation image. Right, this thing's sitting up here. So we'll add a space for that. We'll call it image.quotes. Usually with things like this, team, like really small icons like this, I'm thinking in my head, how can I actually use this with an after element or a before element and not even use a picture? Like for example, these shapes here, right? Technically, we could actually build these shapes inside CSS and not have any picture. So we may even decide to do that as a trick. That way, you're not asking the user to download a picture. So we've got these quotation marks. So in this case, I think they're designed in such a way that I don't think we can do that with CSS. So we'll have to use a picture for that one. And we've also got the profile picture. So image.profile. All right, so we'll fill that in later. Yep, there we go. Okay, so now we've got these cards. So let's go ahead and we can see that they're quite repeatable. So we're going to create some consistency with this. All right. Any questions so far on the quotation? What sort of HTML we're using? Why we're using it? Cool. Okay, so who knows what I'm going to use? What's the best representation, HTML representation of this element here? What do we think, team?
List?
Button?
A button. Well, I think
Or
there
a
might
list of buttons.
Yeah. So do we think the whole thing is a button?
I think
No.
that's more of a demonstration more than it is an actual button.
Yeah. But let's say it wasn't a demonstration. Let's actually pretend that it was real, right? Do we actually view the whole thing as a button? Like there are button elements, right? These blue and green things are buttons, but the whole thing itself, I wouldn't use a button for it.
So would that be a div of buttons?
List of
We
lists?
could.
I hesitate to say table of buttons. I know that's
List.
frowned upon.
Yeah, I would actually just use a list item. So I would actually have a list around as a UL around the whole thing, and then I would have actually I would use an ordered list because the order actually matters in this. So I'd say an ordered list, right? And then I'd have list items for each of these, and then I'd have a button inside each one. Make sense? Okay, so let's do this. So we're going to have the ordered list dot cards. All right, list item. The first one's going to have a button, and inside this button, it's going to have an image of add. All right, so that plus button, that's going to be green. All right, class equals green. Then we have just use a span. All right, add new card. Like that. So that's the first one done. All right, that's the most simple one. The next one is going to be, it has a blue button. Yep.
Yeah, any reason we are doing ordered list? Because we don't need those numbers, right?
No, so this is more of a semantic thing, right? Is this order actually matters? It's not really that important, to be honest. But you know, you might actually consider these to be like the last. You might have a sort order as a user of which cards you like to have preference of, and you want to put the ones at the top. It's honestly, this is my interpretation of it. You could see something very different. It doesn't really matter that much. But I'm going to use an ordered list. We're not going to show the numbers, so don't worry about that. Okay, so we've got this blue one, right? That's also going to have a class. This, instead of an add icon, it's going to be a menu or a menu item, right? Then we've got span is the MasterCard. All right, we've got another image down here, which is image.mastercard.
Hey Tristan, you've been writing a lot of code. Could you just copy the code into the Slack so other people can just copy it?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna finish writing all this code and post it in Slack, and we'll go for a break soon. But I just want to get all the HTML done first before I paste it in. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Just so it's useful for you guys, so you see everything at once. So we've got these. Who knows what we're going to use for this? These password things.
Like a circle for CSS.
We're actually just going to use a special character inside HTML, which is just a dot.
Interesting.
So this is not going to be CSS or anything. It's just actually going to be text.
Alt-8, I think.
Alt-8 on a Mac. But let's have a look at the HTML code, right? HTML code for dot. So let's scroll down until we find it, the bullet point. There you go. Right here. So if you use this, that will actually put that on the page for you. I'm using the @ symbol, bool, and then a semicolon. So we're going to do that 4 times. So span.password. There we go. And we've also got the number, right? So span.number. 1211. And that is kind of the HTML that we would use for a single one of these. So we've got this button with the image inside of it. We've got the title of the card, right? You've got an image of the card or an icon. You've got the password, and you've got the number. Make sense, team? Any questions on this that we've covered so far? And what the hell, Frankie? I will post it for you guys, just so you guys can follow along a bit more easy. Where should we put this, team? What channel makes sense? It's a bit of a front-end beginners thing, isn't it? Let's do that. There you go. I'll update this as we go along, so don't worry. But for those who's not in Slack, because you can join it. I think there's been some links posted. Just post them again, Frankie. And then you guys can join this channel when you're in Slack by clicking this plus button, browse channels, and then go to front-end beginners. So I just posted that code in there for everyone. Okay, so we've got a couple more of these cards, right? Visa and then MasterCard. So I'm just going to duplicate this. All right, Visa. I'm not thinking about it too much. MasterCard. Okay, that's about it. And I think from the top section, that is pretty much it, isn't it? Can anybody see anything we're missing?
The hero image?
The actual man himself?
Yes.
No, we're going to use that. We're going to do that in CSS.
Oh.
Just as a background image. Anything else, team? Anything we feel like we're missing from this top section? Okay, let's do this bottom section, and then we'll go for a quick break. Sound good?
Awesome.
So we got this bottom section down here, right? What do we got? We've got more shapes. All right, we've got a H3. So why some people might be asking, why am I calling this a H3? All right, well, we've got this first level heading, so this is a H1. All right, and then between these two, which one's more important? This one is, right? So simple spending for your solution for your company. So this one is H2. All right, and then the next one now on the page is this one. So this is our H3. That's why that's how I'm coming to that conclusion. All right, so we have these shapes. Let's just do that. Shapes, H3 is our features. And then we have the H2, simple spending solution for your company. You know what? I think I'm actually wrong, team. I'm just thinking about this from a semantic perspective. This is a tricky one, right? This is actually a design trick, because this one this one here has more precedence visually, doesn't it? It's bigger, it's larger, stands out more. But when you think about it, right? When you think about the hierarchy in HTML, what makes more sense, having this one at the top or having this one at the top? Right? How would you group these things together? Think about it like a book.
From a design or a concept perspective?
From a HTML information perspective. Because remember, information and design are different things. They're separated.
I think the bottom one has more relevancy in terms of content.
Yes, but as far as hierarchy is concerned, right? We're getting very semantic now, and I might be overthinking this, right? But there is a potential argument to make this the H2 and to make the bottom one the H3. So I don't actually know the answer to this question. Because this one visually is a little bit more, well, it is, it's visually more important. But semantically, this one may be more important. It doesn't really matter. Again, it's the sort of difference between an unordered list and an ordered list. Like, you're getting a little bit pedantic about it.
It is a brain teaser, because for many years, H1, H2, H3, people associated that with like the visual size of the font. Now that we're in a semantic age, you do have a point that if a search bot or other computer is going to view this with like mechanical eyes, ignoring all styling, and you need to tell it that this whole section of the site is the features, our features section.
Correct. And this technically, like this simple spending, technically lives underneath our features.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I've just convinced myself. I'm going to change it. Is anybody confused by what we were just speaking about there? Is anyone's like, what's going on? Because I don't understand what they were talking about.
And as well, what I would do in that our features, I would put casing on it, and then in the styling, you apply large full caps on the letter.
Yeah, sure, you can do casing. Yeah. So, like, you mean like this kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in another way, and from another perspective, we're designing the content of the page so that it's going to look how we want in, let's say, a Google search result. If it's a rich card, or a screen reader is going to read off this to a blind person. And then this section, the first thing that the screen reader will say is our features. That's what
our features.
The semantic stuff is for, really. The ultimate use case.
It is. That's exactly what it's for. I'm going to refresh my knowledge on something, team, if you'll permit me to. Because I feel like this might potentially be a good case for a definition list.
Tristan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, now we are using H2 for our features and H3 for that text. So
That's
then
correct.
in CSS, to meet that design visually, we'll have to then add class names and tweak their default sizes then, the font size?
No. In fact, if it's a bit, that's a great question. It's hard to know without having more design. So it may actually be that they always want the H3 to look like this, the H2 to look like this. We don't quite know.
Out of curiosity, can we look at the dev tools of this website, what they have used for this?
This is not a website.
No, I mean on the website from where you picked this up from, the actual website.
This isn't a website. This is an image.
Oh, okay. Our feature.
So I should thank you. I should have specified that. I went to Dribble. Right, I just went onto Dribble and just picked an image.
I missed it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Cool. So I was looking at something called a definition list because I just have to refresh my memory. This potentially might be a good. So this is not something that I use very often. But a definition list, funnily enough, is a list of definitions. And that might be a really good use case for this list of things here. Right? But in this case, we don't actually have a title. So it might actually be a good use case for this. But in this case, we're just going to use an unordered list. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll call this unordered list, we'll call it features. UL, actually we don't need to even give it a class name because we can already target it pretty easily. So unordered list, we have an li, and each of these has an image and some text. So here's a cool feature, team. This is something you can do in Emmet. I'll show you this, right? So we've got an li, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So times 4, right? Then we're going to use the angle bracket to go inside. And then inside here, we're going to have an image plus, I think it's plus, and then some span. And inside the span, we'll have some lorem ipsum. Now, if I press tab, that automatically generates all that for us. Pretty cool, right? I'm going to post that snippet on. This is what we call an Emmet snippet. Get to know your keyboard shortcuts because they're quite useful.
I heard that there's another terminology for that. It's called Zen coding.
Possibly. I'm pretty sure this is Emmet, but I could be wrong. And then each of these, we're just going to put them on a new line. So as you can see here, I'm using multi-line select. Definitely get to use that as well. Okay. And then that's it. That's it, team. That's all we've got for the HTML. That's a wrap. That's the easy part done. All right, so I'm going to post this up on, and maybe I've missed a few things, so we'll see. it'd be good to get you guys to have a look at it. I'm going to add that up here. So that's all on this channel now for you. Should have that. Let's take a short break. Let's say 10 minutes. We'll come back at 20 past 11. Just a chance to give you guys a bit of a stretch break. Go and get some water. Go to the bathroom. But I'm gonna come back in about 10 minutes. Well, I'll come back sooner, but we'll come back as a team in about 10 minutes. So,
Cool.
Work well.
Thanks, Tristan.
All right. Awesome.
Good stuff.
So there'll definitely be a back-end side. But if there's anything else you guys want to see, let us know. Cool. So let's get stuck back into it. All right, just start sharing my screen again. So who's following along? All right, who's actually coding along and getting something working?
I think Sandy's coding along with you.
Cool. We're about to jump into the fun part, right? The CSS. So let's load this up in the browser. I'm going to go right click, copy relative path or copy path, go into the browser and just paste that in. Cool. Job done, right? Looks great. That looks like this, right? You guys can see this, right? They're the same.
That's it. We're done.
We're done? Job done? We'll hand that over to the designer, shall we? And say, hey, it's ready. Ready for review. No. We gotta add all the styling to this now, which is the fun part, in my opinion. CSS is something that is challenging when you're first starting out, but over time you start to learn the intricacies, you start to learn the patterns and the rules, and it actually does become quite enjoyable. I really enjoy writing CSS now. Well, I remember when I first started out, I thought, what the F is going on with this? I had no idea how to move everything around. I was telling a joke the other night on Wednesday, which was, you know, two CSS properties walk into a bar, and somewhere on the other side of the world, the bar stool falls over. And it's this joke because, you know, you go and you change things, and you think you're working on something, but then all of a sudden, everything else breaks. And it's like, oh my God, I just want to... It's like a spider web. Everything is kind of connected together. So hopefully today will make things a little bit easier for you. Now, when I'm styling, I go from top to bottom, out to in, right? Top to bottom, global to specific. So the first thing I'm going to think about is page styling, the actual entire page. So we've got some fonts here. I don't know exactly what font he's using. So let's just make it up. I'm going to go to fonts.google.com. This looks like Avenir or something like that. I don't think they have Avenir, but we'll just choose something that looks decent. So here's probably a good point on font choices, right? Like, what is the message and the branding? Your font is kind of the... Think about it this way, right? If you want to write a letter to someone, let's say you're writing a letter to your loved one, someone that you really care about, or an old friend that you haven't seen in a long time, and you know no one really writes letters these days anymore. So you want this one to be really special, right? Are you going to write that thing on a napkin, right, and send them a napkin in a dirty envelope? No. But if it's your enemy, you might. Right, if it's someone you really don't like, might even have a coffee stain on it. So fonts are kind of the vehicle in which you're communicating something. They're very important. They're very important to match up to the message that you're trying to communicate. So, you know, if we were building a website for, I don't know, what's an example? Well, in this case, it's banking, right? So you want it to have this clean, professional look. We would not use something like, I don't know, that's a silly one, like this, right? Anton. This is not a very nice banking font. It doesn't really scream to me that you're professional and that I want to give you my money. All right? Now, this might be a really nice font for, I don't know, let's say we're opening up a barbecue restaurant. Right? It's bold. It's fun. It's kind of it has a little bit of a fun element to it. All right? Bob's Barbecue. Right. Probably a little bit more better for that kind of thing. Right. But you know, if we're choosing a bank, right, we want something that's a little bit more tried and true. Right? We don't want something that's necessarily technical. But this is kind of what I'm saying is like this would be a terrible font for a bank. Right? No way would you do this. Right? Trust us with your money. Right? That just reads funny, doesn't it? It doesn't look good. But what if we were to change this messaging and it was a different thing altogether? What if it was a dating app, right? From me to you with love. Right, now it fits. Now it fits that message. Right, this reads well. Well, if we were to go back to this one we had before and say the same thing. From me to you with love. That just looks terrible. Doesn't fit it at all. Right? So think about the messaging, the tonality, the voice of how you want to communicate. It's a really big thing. And that's kind of harping on what we're talking about on Thursday night. But you know, you want to choose a font that actually fits what we're doing. So in our case, it's a tech. It looks like it's a technology bank. It's a little bit playful, right? A little bit playful. Actually, kind of reminds me of the bank that I use, right? Which is a technology bank. They've got a very millennial style of branding that really appeals to, you know, my approach. This is actually a bank, believe it or not, and it's a really good one too. So, but they've got this bold kind of font. Okay, so what makes sense for our use? We want something clean, classic, but also it's not old. It's not an old bank. You know, it's kind of a new one. So we want something that has a little bit of a pop to it. We want to use bold. We set bold on this. Not exactly. But anyway, I digress a little bit too far. Let's just use Roboto, because Roboto is pretty safe. Right. So how do we use a font and a Google font on our own website? Well, how many have we actually got in terms of weight? So we've got this medium weight here. We've got this bold weight here. Do we have a thin? We've got italic. That's another one. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through and select them. So we've got a regular. Right, select this style. We've also got the bold, the black. We've also got this italic, this medium italic. So grab that. Now, the reason why I'm selecting these individually is because every time you do this, right, it's creating something that the user has to download. So the more you have, the more the user has to download. And if you're on mobile, downloading fonts can take some time. So make sure that you don't add too much to it. What else have we got? Let's stick with those 3. All right. We can add more if we need them. So we're going to come over here to embed, import, and CSS. Grab this. I'm just going to chuck this at the top of our CSS file, which we don't currently have. Go ahead and create styles.css. Now, you guys tell me what you'd like to do. Do we want to use base CSS, like just plain old CSS, or do we want to use Sass or something like that? You guys tell me.
Sass would be good.
Okay. Cool. So to do that, we're going to have to complicate things just a little bit. All right, I'm going to install Sass with npm. So I'm going to go yarn add. I'm just going to create a package JSON first off with nothing in it. All right, just an empty JSON. I'm going to go yarn add node Sass. That's it. That's all I'm going to add. I'm going to have git ignore node modules, just to remove that from git. All right. I'm also going to add a little script for us, which is just going to build the Sass. All right. So build, it's going to be node Sass, and we'll put that in our Sass folder. All right. Build node Sass star. I'll just get this working first, and then I'll give you guys this code. All right, so I'll put this into base.scss. I think it takes an out directory, so we'll go out CSS like that, and we'll also remove the CSS from git ignore because that's built. Let's try that. So let's go yarn build. No input file was found. Let me just ask for help on this. Yarn node Sass help. I forget exactly the syntax. Try putting some quotation marks around this. Let's see if that fixes it. Nope. Input.css. Cursive, that might help us. Let's just try this. There we go. That worked. We can see our base CSS is in there. There you go, team. So I'll just give this on Slack. Very, very, very basic npm. I'm not even going to add a name or a version or anything like that because we don't need it. And then I'm also going to do a watching thing. So just set up a dev thing for us. So watch, which is going to go yarn build -- watch. So it's going to run this, but it's also going to add the watch command at the end, so we don't have to keep building our Sass manually. Great. Someone's mic just got turned on, so if you're not sure who that was. Cool. Okay, so for those who are a little bit more advanced, what else do we do when we're setting up a CSS project from scratch? Does anybody know? What's a common thing that we'll include? And that most libraries do for you. Pardon?
Browser reset?
That's exactly right. So what is a reset? Well, a reset comes into Where are we? Comes into our document. Now see how we've got all these different styles that are automatically added? Like the unordered list has, so the ordered list has the numbers, H2s and H3s, and lists have the bullet points and all this stuff. Right? This is all the browser coming through, and block quotes are indented and things like that. This is the browser saying this is the default style. What we're going to do is reset that, set everything to 0. So just Google CSS reset. I'm going to use this first link that comes up, the Maya Web one. Just copy all of this. Nothing fancy. And there you go. Just going to put it in there, and then I'm just going to import that. All right, import reset. And that's it. Now the other thing we need to do is obviously include this inside our HTML. So we can go link rel or link CSS, and that's going to be CSS base.css, just like that. And now if you come back and look at it and refresh, and see how everything just got reset back to plain text. No margins, nothing. It's all just base stuff. So that's what we want. So good job, Cal, for pointing that out. All right. What else? So remember, we're going from top to bottom, right? Out to in. So global to specific. So what else can we think about? Here's a question for you, team. How do we, what units do we use when we're using CSS? Typically, what's considered good practice?
YY says RAM, REM.
Yeah. Why not pixels?
Because one is absolute size, and the other one is relative size.
What does that mean? All right. Well, what if I want to, on mobile, change things around? Right, resize or zoom in and out. It makes it very difficult if everything is fixed. So what rem is we set the font size on the HTML element, on the page that wraps everything, right? And then everything else becomes relative. That's what a rem is, relative emphasis. It's relative to that root element. So if I change that root element, let's say I have on the HTML element, so we'll go into our Sass, right? On the HTML element, which is the root, we'll say font size 10, because it's relative to the font size. Now, this is the one case where I'm going to use pixels. Now, let's say on the body, right? I say font size 1.4 rem. All right, what is this? How large will this be? Well, it's 1.4 times 10, which is what?
Tony says 14 pixels.
14 pixels. Yep. What if I change this to something else, like 16? Well, we have to do the math, right? 16 times 1.4. 22.4. Right? So just by changing one number, everything else changes. So that's why we use rem. And that's I like to set it to base 10. Because base 10, right? This is very easy to read and conceptualize. 1.4 is 14. But if I want to change it, I can do so very, very easily just by changing the root value. Does that make sense, team? Any questions on why or how we use font size or rem? Excellent. Let's go ahead. So what else? What else do we need to know from a global perspective? We might want to set up some colors. right? So unfortunately, right, this is just a picture. I can't actually come in here and inspect these things. So in Figma, and other tools have their own things as well, right? In fact, there's actually one built into Mac called Me, digital color meter app. So if you actually move this around, you'll actually see all the colors, which is pretty cool. In this case, it's 0, 194, 169. So let's set up our colors, right? So color green is RGB 0, 194. What was it, 162? $169. Right. Now I like to set these to hex codes, so they're a bit easier, so a bit smaller. So there's a color green, got a color blue, which is 0, 119, and 255. So RGB 0, 199, and 255. That's that nice blue. That actually looks a little lighter. 119. 119. There we go. That's better. A nice blue there. We've got this gray. Right. This gray actually has a little bit of a gradient, I think, to it, but let's just say it's a pretty even 254. Or is that even? Yeah. We'll try and choose that darker. I think he probably has a gradient that comes down. He's doing something here. It's a bit hard to tell. So let's use this darker color down the bottom, which is 248, 249, 251. Right, 248, 254, 299, 252. Right, just that off white. Do you see that? That's a color blue. It's a color. Let's call this gray, and then we'll say 100. So what I often do is I go from 100 to 900. 100 being the lightest, right? 900 being the darkest. It's not 50 shades of gray. It's only 9 shades of gray. So sorry to disappoint. What else we got? This light green color here. So 229, 249 RGB. So 229, 249, and 237. All right, so that's that light green. So usually I call like the central color the 500 because it's right in the middle. All right, this one's a really light one, so we'll say 100. So this is just the different shades. Say again?
Tristan, Sandy says, can you post that sample image that you pull from Dribble?
Ah, yes, that's a really good idea. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Should have already done that. Where were we on that? That was this one here. I'm just going to copy this link for you. I'll post that in here. I'll also post that on the chat for those who are not already in Slack. There you go. Thank you. That's a good point. Okay, so the blue, again, they're going to have that 500 for that middle color. All right. Let me show you actually just quickly what I mean by these numbers. So this is what we're currently using for Code Mentoring's color palette. Right? So the 100 is like the lightest color. The 900 is the darkest version of that color, and the 500 is smack bang in the middle. So we've got 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. Oh, sorry, starts here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 being the main base color. 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 being the darkest version of that color. So that's what I mean. That's quite useful, and it makes it very easy for people to use your use your colors because you're not doing like light, lighter, lightest, or dark, darker, darker. It gets confusing. So having these numbers makes it very easy. All right, what else have we got? So we've got this this other one here. It's blue. 231, 241, 255. 231, 241, 255. So that's that light blue. Right. So that's a 100. We've got this black, this dark color. So let's try and find exactly where that is. This one here. So 327.78. 327. Is it 78? All right. So I'm actually going to refer to this as probably the darkest gray. All right, so I'll give this a 900. All right, that really dark gray. Then we've also got the gray of the text. This text here. So this will be a little bit more challenging to find, but I think we can zoom in. We'll use this value here. 101, 115, 101, 155, 115, sorry, and 147. And don't worry, I'll post all these colors up so you guys don't have to get these values yourself, because this is the annoying part. Realistically, right, if we were working on a larger project, for example, Project CM, right, these colors are all defined for you in here. You don't have to worry about this. Usually the designer will give it to you. So most of the time you don't have to jump into this stuff and do this annoying thing. It should sort of be handled for us automatically. Did anybody see any colors that I've missed? I think that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple color palette, this one. All right, let's run with this. So we've got the gray, let's call this gray 500. Right. This is what I have currently for the CSS. There you go. Any questions on anything I've covered with the colors or the hex codes or anything like that? Cool. What else? Is there any other top sections or global styles that we need to think about? Or should we get stuck into it? I think we should get stuck into it. So we've gone from outside to in, right? Let's go in. So we're going into the top section now. All right. So let's style this header. I think that's probably the first thing to do. So how far we've kind of got this. We can see here we've got these lines here. All right, you can kind of see how the content fits in. This one's a little bit off. That button's a little bit off-centered. We've kind of got this main wrapper that we'll think about. So how large is that? It's about 1,200 pixels. All right, so this main wrapper is about 1,200. Now there are a couple of things that are sticking out of that, but we'll use that as our main wrapper. And then we've got, I think this looks pretty centered to me. And then we've got these two things here. Okay, so all the base text seems to have this standard gray color. So let's go ahead and set that color, and we'll say color gray 500. All right, we're also going to set the font family to, what do we have, Roberto? And we'll give it a fallback of sans serif. Like that. We'll come into our page, go back here, refresh. All right, so we're starting to see some of that unfolding. All right, now let's set the base size to, this looks a little bit larger. So we'll say, you'll set the base size to 1.6. Just a little bit larger. Great. So I think that's probably all we need for that. Global text. Now the header, right? Each of these items, right, has some margin between it, doesn't it? This is about. I don't know what grid system they're using, but this looks to be about. Let's just approximate it at 80 pixels or 8 rem. So in our header, right? We're going to go in the nav for the anchor. I'm going to say margin left. Margin. Do we want to do left or right? We'll do right. We'll do margin right, 8 rem. Refresh. All right, so you guys can see that. A little bit of space in between them. Now we've got this ugly style for the links, don't we? How do we fix that, team? We've also got it here too. Anybody know how to fix that style for the link? Who can tell me?
You want to change the CSS for the A tag, for the A tag?
Yep. But what CSS? What am I going to change?
Text decoration.
Text decoration. That's the one. So that's going to be for all anchors. Right? What are we going to set it to? We set it to none. Right, to remove that underline. And we're also going to set the color right back to that gray, because we don't want the visited color to come up, that ugly purple. So now it's just been reset, which is good. Okay, so we've got that there. Now let's style these buttons, right? Let's actually add some buttons. Now before I do that, I'm actually going to break up the files a little bit. So I'm going to have the components. I'm going to have button.scss, and I'm going to import that here. Import components button, like that. Just to break it up a little bit, and we'll actually do that after we've done the color definition. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing with type. So type.scss, and to do the same thing with type. Type is just going to include all the rules for our typography. So we'll actually go ahead and do that. We'll grab these guys. And we'll put that in type, just to make it a little bit more organized. We're going to do the same with header. Header, SCSS. We'll grab this guy. Put him in there. And also include him here. Okay, that makes sense, team? Just a little bit of refactoring on that. Cool. So type, resetting that. While we're at it, we might as well do a little bit of type for our H1, H2, and whatnot. So we'll have H1. Let's say it's a font size of, say, 64. So font size 6.4. It's going to be the color. It's going to be that dark gray. Cool. We've got a H2. So this is it. Remember, this is our H2 here. All right. So H2 is going to be pretty small font size. In fact, I think that's even as small as the main one. So we'll just go font size 1.6 rem. Right. Text transform uppercase. Let's turn that into uppercase. And color green, 500. It's that middle green. And we also have the H2, which is pretty much the same as the H1, just a little smaller. So this to me looks about 24, 2.4. I'm just estimating this team. Doesn't matter too much. Because this is not a real design. It's not uppercased. And it's that dark gray. 900. Let's go back and have a look and see what's changed. Nothing has changed. Why has nothing changed? We importing them? Yeah. What's going on? I wonder why. There we go.
Tristan,
Okay,
Tony
looks like I just had to resave it. Yeah.
And he said, is the reset too far down?
That might be a good point, actually. No, it's not. It's at the top. That is a good question. And I've actually just found we have an error. So this header, or the type, is trying to... Okay. Yeah. So these colors. Now, here's another problem, right? See how it's actually creating all these individual CSS files? We don't want this. And the way we fix this in Sass is we add an underscore to the start of each file. Like this. So it should hopefully fix up that problem. Okay, looking good. Right, we need to add a font weight to these things. All right. So the type. All right, this is font weight 900. Same with the H3 font weight 900. Get that black look. That's probably a little bit too much, but that's fine. Again, just someone, I think this is not on mute, so just make sure you mute yourself, please. Cool. Frankie, I think it's you, mate. It's going to be. Cool. Okay, so now we're starting to get a beginning sense of this style with this. All right, some of these text things. So let's go back to, we're going to do the button. That's right. So let's go into the button. I think we call it button primary. BTN primary. So, what are we going to do with this one, team? You guys tell me. What are some of the things you notice about the buttons? So we've got height, right, don't we? Got some padding. We've got some radius around the sides. And someone sets messaging something. Text inside and outside. What do you mean by outside? I'm not sure what you mean by the outside. This is a separate entity. So we're not going to have any text there. It's just this self-contained blue guy that we've got. So we've got colored white, right? It's a white one. I think that's pretty much it. So how high is he? Let's say 48. So say height 4.8 rem. Right, color is white. Border radius, it's quite small. I think that's only about 4 pixels. Border radius 4 pixels. Now this is one of them. Right, 4 pixels is actually one of the things that I'm not going to set as a rem. I'm going to set it as specifically the pixel value. Same with borders, like the actual width of borders, because you don't really want that changing as you zoom in and out. Right, that is one thing that I'm going to keep fixed. Right, kept as pixel value. Now I'm kind of getting to a point where there's lots of files here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add this into Git. Git init. I'm going to turn this into initial commit. Let's just make sure it's running first. Looking good before we commit it. We'll do this. We'll fix up the button, and then we'll commit it. And let's also add a background. So the background is the color 500. Wait for that to come through. Cool. Now, who knows why why this height isn't working? Right? Remember from Wednesday's talk about display property. Right? What does this look like it's set to right now?
Block?
No. Does that look like a block element to you?
Oh no, I was looking at that H one.
The H. This is a block. This is a paragraph. But what about this guy? He's a button. Actually, it's not a button. It's actually remember this is an anchor tag. So I've set the height, but why isn't it working?
The parent's height need to be
Nope.
set as well.
No, we don't want to change the parent. If I've learned anything in life, it's much easier to change yourself than your parents. I'm just joking.
Do we need span around it?
Nope, no span. Come on, guys. This is what we learned on Wednesday. Right, what are the 3 types of the main displays that we have?
Inline block.
Block, inline block.
Yeah. Right. So do we want it to be block?
No,
No. Why not?
it will move.
Because we want it to sit nicely with everyone else, right? We don't want it to be the fat cousin taking up everything. Right? We don't want it to be inline, right? Because we can't change the height.
Inline
Right?
block?
Inline block. So that's what we did. We set it to inline block. Boom.
So Sandy got a question. Why use rem and not just rm? EM, sorry.
So EM is relative to the current context. It's a great question. So EM is relevant to the current context, whereas rem is actually going all the way back up to the HTML element, and it's changing it in one place. So EM can be useful sometimes. I don't often use it though. Does that answer your question? Have a look on the chat.
She said yes.
Yep, awesome. Thanks, Sandy. Cool. So, team, this is another common thing we see. All right, just zoom in a little bit. Look at this. All right, we set the height, but how do we actually set this guy in the middle?
Maybe we need margin,
Nope, not a margin. Remember, margin's outside.
padding.
We could do padding, right? But then we have to get it Pardon me?
Vertical align?
Vertical align. Yeah, that's a great point. Vertical align is a tricky one. It's not what it doesn't do what you think it does. Vertical align, right? If you've got multiple inline or display inline elements, right? What vertical align does is it actually aligns it relative to its siblings. So, for example, this guy here, login, if I go vertical align bottom, we'll go through some of these. Right? See how it's actually moving that like that? So it's actually not relevant to the height of itself, but vertical align is actually the relative to the line of its other inline elements. So it's a little bit confusing.
Okay, thank you.
But it's a good try. That when I was starting out with CSS, that got me a lot.
Flex.
We could use flex, but there's no
text align.
Text align. So text align is horizontal. We don't want to do it horizontally. We want to do it vertically. Now, someone might say flex. So if we go display flex, right, or display inline flex if you want it to be inline, right. We go align items center. Right, that seems to work. That seems to work. Another way to do it, which is actually a simpler way, is just line height. Now, what's the caveat with line height? Frank, I'm just going to ask you to mute yourself again, mate. Thanks. What's the issue with line height? Right? It works well if it's just one line, because we can come in here and go here, and we'll set the line height to the same as the height. So line height 4.8 rem. Right, that's fine. But what's the problem with this potential solution in other contexts? Not this context. In this context, it's okay. But in other contexts, what's the problem?
If it's like a paragraph tag or something, it's gonna apply.
Yeah.
To
if you have multiple lines, right, all of them will become really large. So if we have a button that actually wraps onto a multiple thing and you want that to be centered, you'd have to do something like flex. But in this case, we're going to use line height because we don't want the buttons to wrap. We want them to stay in a single line. So we're going to go add line height 4.8 rem. And we'll add a little bit of padding as well. So padding, no padding on the top and bottom. We want to have about one rem. Yeah, and there we go. There's our little button. What's common to do with buttons, team? What's a good user experience? If Susie's on the channel, she'll already tell me that it needs to have a cursor pointer. But it already has a pointer, so you can't get angry at me for that, Susie. But what else do we usually have? Right? These things. Hover, yeah? So some kind of hover state. Now to do this, we have to add some extra colors. So I'm going to come in here and add darker. So I'm going to have like a 600. So come into this, just make that a little bit darker. Like that. And then I'm also going to have a 400. So a 400 is going to be a little lighter. Just like that. So it's going to alternate between 500 as the base, 400 as the hover, and then 600 as maybe when we press down. Make sense? So in here we're going to go hover, background color, 400 for the hover, and when it's active, right, when we press down on it, right, it's going to be a 700. Oh, sorry, 600, not 700. Did I call it 700 the other one? Oh, cool. See how I'm hovering over this now? And then if I click on it, it goes darker. And that's how you do a little button. Now, what else might we decide to add to this interaction? What's a common thing we often do?
Transition.
To transition those color values. You're on the ball today, Frank. I love it. So we don't want to set it to too big. What's a pretty common transition time for something like a background color team? Personally, I'd use something like 0.2 seconds. So this might be hard to see on the actual recording of this. It's just a slight fade. You don't want it to be too long, right? Now you'll notice, see when I refresh this page, see how it's got this weird jumping around, right? When the CSS loads. So we don't want that. So we're just going to set it to the background color. We only want the transition to apply to the background color. And that way we don't get that weird jumping. We still get it when we hover. Or at least I think we should. Who can tell me why this is not working? It's gone, it's reverted now. So who can tell me why that transition is not working? It's a little tricky.
You need to apply the animation property?
No, animations is actually when you're applying a different animation. Transition is the correct thing to do. This might be a little tricky, right, to find. So what are we changing here? We're changing the background color. We're transitioning the background color. But what is it initially set to? It's background. It's not background color. So that's just a slight discrepancy in the animation. And that's still not working. Huh. Sorry. Background color all. I'll remove that. It was incorrect. It was invalid. There we go. Now it's working. And if I go back to this, that should also hopefully work. Okay, it does. Cool. Disregard what I was saying before. It was a typo. I had background color all. That doesn't make sense. Background color, 0.2 seconds. You can actually animate multiple things in here, right? Everything else we can say 0 seconds. As an example. It's just that background color that you want to change. Cool. So I'm going to push this out to Git, but before I do, any questions on anything we've covered so far? You can see we're starting to get this header looking good now, slowly. Was there anything you guys are confused about, or anything you want me to clarify before I push this up?
Yeah, Tristan, that transition property, what was that all thing that was creating problems?
So, yeah, so you can do all like this, right? That transitions everything. So every single thing on the button, whether it's the width, whether it's the height, whether it's the background color, whether it's the margin, this will transition everything. But as you can see with this, the problem is, see how we've got this weird thing where as it loads up, it actually moves the size around? So what I did was I just set it to background color. But when I did it, I did this. And I accidentally left the all in there. And that was actually invalid. So if I come in here and actually inspect that, yeah, see how that's actually invalid. So removing that out will fix that problem for us all. Make sense?
Yep, thanks.
Cool. All right, so I'm gonna add this in Git for you guys. Just gonna call it init commit. Push it up. We currently don't have a repository, so I'm gonna go into code mentoring, GitHub. So create a new repository. What should we call this? UI breakdown. Right. Saturday session where we broke down an image, a design. We should post a link to that design in here as well. Make public. Okay. We'll grab this here. Go git promote add origin. Go git push. And there you go. So as I'm going through, I'll intermittently post up the code, but that will help you with just all the Sass files that we've got going here. Just make it a bit easier for you guys to follow. So hopefully that helps. I might actually rename this to webinar. UI breakdown. There you go. Cool. Okay, so what's next, team? So we've kind of got this header. We haven't styled this guy. So let's do the login. I think we had a text button. So we had a class for this one. Button text. So we'll go back to our buttons thing. We'll do .button text. I think all this is going to have on it is a slightly larger font weight. No, it's still normal. I think it's just going to be that color and the line height. So we'll do the same thing as we did here. All right, except it's not going to have a background. It's not going to have a border radius. It's not going to have transitions or hovers or actives. It's just going to have the color. And it's going to be that blue 500. And that should hopefully... Nope. Are we building our project? That's probably why. Watch. Okay. So there's that little button. Now here's the other thing, right? Is we don't want to have that space in between them, or not as much. So we've only got quite a small space there. So in our header, in our nav, we'll say a.button text. And we're going to reset. See how all the anchors have this margin, right? We're going to reset that to something smaller. Let's just say 1.6. Maybe even less. There we go. That's looking a little bit more like that design that we see there. Okay, so what else should we do for the header? We've got a little bit of spacing in between it, so we'll do that. So how much space is this? This is about 52 pixels. So we'll do that. We'll say margin top 5.2 rem, just to give it that push off the top. And then we also want to center it in the middle. So this is a really good use case for flex, display flex, justify. Who knows how to put this in the center? Anyone know? What flex property is it?
Justify content.
Justify content. Boom. Right. Looking pretty good. I think in the design they've got the situation where this is sitting on the side. Right. So let me just try something. Let me just try something first. See if this works. I'll explain it in a second. No. Okay, that didn't work. All good. Let me think about this. So we've got the situation where we want these guys to be in the middle, right? But we want this guy to be at the end. So how are we going to do it?
Just so we can wrap login and get started within a div. And then maybe we can do like a space between. Oh no, but that might change the set.
Yeah, I know, right? You could do a space between, but I know, it's a little tricky. So we want this one to be hard right on the thing. We also need to add a wrapper to it. Are you guys okay with just leaving it as it is for now? We can jump into that later, but I think there's more valuable things to jump into. We'll do some of this other stuff. We'll add that as a to-do. All right. Or maybe you guys could do it for homework. Okay, so next thing is this part here. So let's do the pill first. Components.pill, pill.css, SCSS. Pill's really easy. Nothing fancy on this one. So we've got a border radius, we've got a height of 32. Who knows how to get that rounded corner like that? It's border radius, but who knows what to set that to get it as a perfect circle like that?
50%.
Ah, good try. Let's see what happens.
Sandy says 0.5.
0.5. We'll see. We'll say background color green, color white. I think it has a transfer. Yep, uppercase. Text transform uppercase, and we'll import this in our base. So this is what happens, team. That's what happens when you have a border radius 50%. Now, if your width and height are the same, it will make it a perfect circle, which is a really good tip. But in this case, we can't do that. So what do we do instead? All right, someone said 0.5. 0.5 what? 0.5%, 0.5 rem. What am I setting this to? I'm gonna check the chat. Try rem, Sandy says. 0.5 rem. Why is that not saving? Hello? So 0.5 rem, you can see that. It's only about 5 pixels. All right, I think somebody else had something. Frank says give different percentage to width and height. I don't think we have that level of control, mate. Unfortunately. I might be wrong, but I don't think we do. You can set individual corners, but I don't think you can set the width and height of the radius. So unfortunately, what we have to do is take the height and then divide by 2. So in this case, it's going to be 1.6 rem. And that will give us those rounded corners there. Now the issue with this, right, is now that we're actually losing some of this text cutoff. So why don't we set the font size to something smaller, 1.2 rem. No, that's not going to work. So we'll have to add, display, the height's not working. So what do we do instead, team? Well, if it's the same as a button.
Inline block.
Inline block. All right, it's not inline and it's not block. It's display inline block. There we go. And then the same thing with the height, the line height as the button. Now the issue with this border radius, right, is it's cutting off that text. So we'll also add some padding. Very similar actually to a button, this component. So 0 and we'll say 1 rem. And also give it a font weight bold. Maybe not so much. Maybe say 600. I don't think we have that middle one. That's fine. We'll just leave it as that. Yeah, that's fine. All right. Looks pretty decent. All right, we're getting there. Starting to see how it's shaping up in our team, right? So I'm gonna add that in to Git. So we just added that pill button text. So let's do this. Style added button text. Style added pill. And that's on Git for you guys to look at. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of a margin between these guys. So this is about 40 pixels. So I'm actually going to create a homepage file. This home.css. Now the reason why, we're only doing one page in this example, but the reason why is this is going to be the base that applies to everything. And the home page only applies to this page. So this is what I'm going to do. Section title. All right. We have this this wrapper. I might rename this wrapper to something else, because the wrapper we might want to use for something to encapsulate, you know, the maximum width of the page. So I might call this like text. Right. So text is going to have a maximum width of, say, 500 pixels or 500 rem. So 50 rem, 500 pixels. The pill, all right, has a margin bottom, what do we say, 40? So margin bottom 4 rem. And actually, this space here looks the same as this space here. So instead of adding it to the pill, I'm actually going to add it to the H1. So the H1 will have a margin top and bottom of 4 and a margin left and right of 0. Now this is going to create an extra page for us, hopefully. Yep, it does. So we're going to need to also include that in our HTML. So the idea behind this, right, is the base applies to all the pages, and the home only applies to the home or index page. All right, now we're getting somewhere. What else, team?
Hey, Tristan, can you show me how you worked on the radius again, please?
On the what?
To the pill, yeah. Border radius to the pill.
To the pill?
Yes, please.
So we had the height,
yeah,
of 3.2. Mm-hmm. Let's look at it mathematically, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a height, a diameter of a circle, right? And the diameter is 32. Right, so that's the 30. That's or thereabouts, right? I think in this case it's 31, but let's just pretend that it's, in our case, it's 32. So you've got this 32 pixels. Now you want your radius to actually come around as a perfect circle. It's not a little bit. So let me give you an example of a rectangle. All right, so this rectangle is 32-ish.
Yeah.
Right, now in this rectangle, this is exactly the same as what we're doing in CSS. Right, you can have this border radius. Right, now someone said 0.5 rem. So that's about 5 pixels, right? That's what we had before.
Yep.
But as we keep going, it becomes rounder and rounder and rounder and rounder and rounder. Eventually, I could set this to 3,000. All right, that doesn't make sense. Right? What you want to do is set it to half the height, because it's the radius is half the diameter. So in this case, it's 32 pixels high. So half the diameter is the radius, which is what?
18.
16.
Oh, 16. Sorry, yeah. 16.
So 16. So half of 32 is 16. Therefore, that's how we arrive at the 1.6 rem. 16 pixels.
I see.
Pretty cool, right?
Yep. Thanks.
No worries. All right. So we got the home CSS. What else, team? Anybody have any other questions? Anything we've covered so far? You guys are starting to see how it's coming together? If this is going too long, I know we said we'd do this in about 2 or 3 hours, so it's already been 2.5. So if you guys are getting sick of this, this is going to take a little bit longer than I thought. So if you want to, we can do a part 2, or we can just keep going today and try and get it all done. You guys tell me what you want to do.
Part 2 should be good.
Part 2?
Yep.
All right, we can do a part 2. So why don't for today we'll finish off this section, this text. We'll do the quotation. We'll do the shapes, and then next week we'll do the cards and the bottom section, and we'll put it on Netlify or something and deploy it somewhere. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Perfect.
All right, so let's finish off this section today then. So, what have we got? We got this paragraph. Now, this paragraph seems to be a larger paragraph. The line height is quite large. Looks to be about 2, maybe even larger than 2. So, come in here. This paragraph. I said line height. Let's just set it to 2 for now. Yeah, that's quite large. We also need to add a background to this. This background looks like it has like going from a white to a gray down here. All right, so from going a diagonal going across this way. So who knows how to do this inside CSS?
Gradients?
Yep. So a linear gradient from top left to bottom right. So let's do that. Section title. So background is linear gradient from top left. Actually, I think it's to bottom right is how you say it. Now it starts off with white, and then we've got the in Sass you need to do this. Anytime you have the parenthesis, you need to have this hashtag, and then yeah, it's just a thing they have to do. And this is going to be the gray 100. Obviously a semicolon. We need to import those colors. Okay, so here's the problem. Right, is these colors are defined here, but we don't want to import base inside the home because base also has all these other things. So what we have to do is take out these colors into a variables file. And actually include them in both. So import colors, import variables, and we'll do the same on home. Import variables. There we go. Why isn't that coming through? Let's have a look. Okay, it looks like it is. I think that color might just be a little bit too soft. So let's try something else. Okay, cool. So it is working. But that gray that we were using is a little bit too soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra gray. Going to say gray 200. Actually, no, we're not even using the 100 anywhere else, are we? So we might as well just make this a bit darker. I'm just experimenting here. Come back into the here. Great. Let's add a little bit more blue to that. A little bit darker blue. There we go. That's a little bit nicer. All right, so you got this white up here, and it's coming down here. Now, who can see a problem with what we've got so far? I don't know if you guys can see this. Can you guys see this line at the top? It'd be easier if I set that back to red. It'd be more obvious. Right, who can see this line at the top? Who knows why this is happening? Anybody have a guess?
Is there some lingering margin or?
Yes, there is. But it's not what you think. Here's the section. There's no margins here, except on the H1. And that's just for the space here. Who knows what this is?
The border box property that we need
Nope.
to.
Nope.
Sorry,
Should we
what was the
reset
question?
margin?
Pardon?
I was asking, what was the question? Because I can't
This-
quite see the
this-
line that you're mentioning.
You can't see this gap here.
Oh, yes, I can see the gap, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, where's that coming from?
Maybe line height?
Nope. It's non-intuitive. Let me take off the background. Right? We want the space in the header, don't we? So it must be coming from the header. So let's have a look. We'll add that back in, go to the header, and now look, margin top. Very strange that it actually pushes everything down. That's because there's nothing before it. And because there's nothing before it, it's just going to add some margin to it, which is really weird. Just something to be aware of, team. If you're ever like confused by this, so what's a very easy way to fix this?
Why says use padding?
Yeah, just use padding. Because padding is inside, right? Margin is outside. Boom. Now it's done. Make sense, team? There we go. Looks a little bit better. So, for today, what else were we doing? So we're doing this. The button is done. We're going to add a little bit of padding, a margin between these guys. About 60 pixels. The margin bottom, 6 run. All right, you'll also notice there's a drop shadow. Is there a drop shadow on... Just going to hide all these things for a second. Is there a drop shadow? Yes, there is. So the button, that's something I missed, is the button has this drop shadow. So let's go ahead and add that in. Box shadow. So who knows how to actually modify or write a box shadow and what all the properties are? Anybody know?
Horizontal offset, vertical offset, blur, and color.
Yep. There's actually another one called the spread as well, but we don't need to get into that. So horizontal is like how far to the left or right does the shadow go, right? So let's use an extreme example. So let's say 100 pixels. There's no Y offset. There's no blur, and we'll set it to black. That's a very extreme example. That it's been pushed all the way to the side. That's the first parameter. So let's just edit this on the fly. Ah, look, if you go into Chrome and you click on it, they actually have this really nice interface for you. Look at this. That's pretty cool. So I didn't even need to explain it now. There you go. So what does blur do? Blur does this. Bloop. Right. See how it's getting fuzzy? And then what does spread do? Spread is actually how large the thing is. Make sense, team?
Yep.
It's pretty cool, right?
That's really cool. I didn't know you have that tool inside the inside Chrome.
It's very nice. All right. So in our case, all right, what do we want? We want just a little bit below. We want no X offset. All right, we want it to blur a little bit. It's probably a little bit too high, so bring him down. All right, spread it out just a little bit. Increase that blur. And then we want to set the color to something lighter. So let's grab this background color. All right, and we'll edit this a little bit. We'll take down the opacity. Just a slight thing like that. You guys can see this? I'm going to reduce, again, I'm going to reduce that Y, because it's still just a little bit too high for me. I'm going to take down that blur just a little bit. And there you go. Toggle it on and off just to show you. It's looking pretty nice. Okay, copy that in. Box shadow. Just like that. There we go. Okay, so now we're actually looking pretty decent. We're really starting to come along with this. We've got this text color stuff here. We'll do that later. For now, how's the paragraph looking? Yeah, paragraph's looking all right. You'll notice that all of this is kind of up against the edge here. So we need to remember how we had before. We had those rules on the sides. All right, so we're going to create that wrapper class, and it's going to wrap the content on the sides. So let's go ahead and add that into the HTML first. So we've got the header. We're going to have the dot wrapper. We're going to put everything inside the wrapper, except the cards, because they sit on their own. So I'm going to add this to the base. Dot wrapper. Max width, I think, what did we say? 1,200 rem. And then it was, who knows how to center it in the middle?
Margin 0 auto.
Yep. In our case, yeah, margin 0 auto is fine. In our case, we can just do margin auto. There we go. Centered in that middle, which is nice. Then we need to add a bit of space between these guys. So got about 80 pixels there. So on the header, sorry, not on the header, on the home page, on the wrapper, margin top 80, 8 rem. Boom. What else? Rid of the shapes. Who wants to see how to make these shapes in HTML and CSS? And not use an image.
Yeah, that would be useful.
Be cool? All right, let's do it. So there's going to be two shapes here. There's a semicircle, and there's this grid of little dots. So we're going to have two elements. Actually, if you're going to get really, really clever, we could actually just use one element for this and use pseudo elements. So I'll show you guys how to do that. This is just showing off a little bit, but you know, it is useful to know. So we have these dot shapes element, right? Just want to make sure we have that in the HTML. So that's not going to be an image anymore. It's just going to be a div. Okay, so the first one, let's say the before is the semicircle. Before. Now, what do we need to have every time on pseudo elements to make sure they show up? Content. It's required. Now, we have this here, which is about 160 by 80. Right? So width is going to be 160 or 16 rem. Right? Height is 8 rem. Now we're actually going to use the border radius stuff that we saw before. So we're going to go border top radius, right, top left is going to be 16 rem, I think. Sorry, 8 rem. All right, half of the circle, and the same with the right. And then background color, and that's going to be that green. Let's see if this works. Nope. Doesn't need a display in my block. Boom, straight off the bat. Look at that, team. It's pretty cool, right? So all I was doing was the same stuff that I was running through with Frank before on this stuff here.
Really cool.
CSS is really cool, team.
Yeah, and I think it's faster too because you're not using images anymore.
I know. Why do you guys? Why do you think I keep telling you guys learn the fundamentals? This is why, so you can do cool shit like this. I think this is really cool. So the second thing that we can do, who has an idea of how to do this? I'm curious.
I was thinking of just making a paragraph and just put a bunch of dots in there, like with the entity code.
Yeah. So that's the amateur way. All right, we're not even going to add an extra element on the page for this. This is all going to be done in CSS. There's just going to be one HTML element, an empty one. All right, this one here.
So is it like CSS?
This is all.
Yep.
Not because to have a grid, you have to use elements. This is the only HTML we're going to have. In fact, if I wanted to really get fancy, I would use a pre-existing element. I wouldn't even add it in. You could do it on the wrapper or the title. I wouldn't even have to have HTML in here. So what we're going to use is a pseudo element with a background image. And the background image is going to be generated from CSS gradients. So I don't remember exactly the code for this, but CSS dot gradient. So we probably don't want to do that many. It should be an easier way to do it. So that's cheating by using a encoded image. So we don't want to do that. All right, that's cheating. We've got CSS gradient here. We don't want that either. There should be a way to do this without. Yeah, see, this is what we want. All right. This is exactly what we want. So what have they got? They've got a background with 2 linear gradients, and that's it. All right. So the yeah, dot color, I think linear gradient. So let's actually copy this. Can we set this to transparent? Does that work? Maybe not. So maybe let's have a look here. I think maybe in this case it may not work because I think you have to have a background color. We almost got away with it. I think we might still be able to. Let's try it. Come back into our CSS. Before, after. All right, we'll just say display inline block, width say 8 rem, height 8 rem. And we'll just paste this code in here and we'll modify it as we go through. All right. So let's see what this looks like first. The content. Okay, and then the dot size, we'll say that's say it's about 4 pixels. Right. We'll say dot space. I say less than that. We'll say 16 pixels. What else? So reduce this down just a little bit, say 7.2. A little smaller. Let me just play with this manually. After. Alright, so just tuck that in. 6.2. What happens if we go even smaller? We'll say 6. 6. Now here's the thing that I really wanted to do. Background color is transparent. And the dot color is that color green, right? Oh, sorry, color blue. Yeah, okay, that doesn't work. We set that to white, that will work. So unfortunately, we can't do this without a background color. But you know what? It doesn't actually look too bad. So if we do like a bit of a margin, we'll set this guy to the same dimensions. Right. We might even, yeah, that's fine. Position relative, and we'll set this guy to position absolute. We'll say like top -2 rem. We'll say left 10 rem. And then this guy himself, absolute. We'll say like left or maybe right, 20%. Say top 20 rem. Right, it's not terrible. It's not terrible. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's not terrible. Like you could argue that could be part of the design guide. Will you guys forgive me? Is that okay?
It looks like Pac-Man dots.
You look like a Pac-Man dot. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's a pretty similar kind of thing, right? Like, it's not perfect, but you guys kind of get the gist of it. If you really wanted to, you could just grab an image or an SVG and turn it into an SVG.
Sandy says, would opacity work?
No. I mean, you can set opacity on the entire thing, but then you also lose the dots.
I'm sure there must be a tool in Photoshop or something that can get rid of all that in the middle.
It's not, that's the thing. It's not about an image. This is not an image. This is a CSS. So I could we could very easily use as SVG, or like I could come and actually do this, right? Like grab these little circles, come through, Control C, Control V. All right, move these out. Make sure it's equal spacing. All right, this kind of thing. I could very easily do this, and then grab. It's annoying. Yeah. Grab that. Deselect all this. All right. Copy, paste, copy as SVG. Paste that in here. All right. Change all these colors to the color that we had, which is that color blue. The variables. All right. So this will technically work. All right, if we had this, we could actually put this inside the HTML as well if we wanted to. So inside the shapes, we could do this. I was just trying to be clever. See, that works. All right, fine, because we did it. Screw you guys. I was trying to be too clever. Now we'll do it. So this is one way. All right, we'll comment that out. And we'll put in the SVG. Position absolute. Left 50%. Top -2. And there you go. So is that okay? Now, if you wanted to, right, you could go even further with this. You could actually convert this SVG into a Base64 string. So Base64 generator. Right. So paste that in. Rather encode. So this is getting like really, really fancy. All right, you've got this big Base64 string here. And then I'm pretty sure if you go data base, I forget exactly, data image. It's kind of what this guy was doing, right? Data image Base64. So let's just copy that. Now, if I remove that and I actually grab the one that we had, like our Base64 string, and I put this here. Right, if I load this in the browser, All right, that should technically work. I don't know why it's not. But that is another way of doing it, and then you can use it as a background image. But you know, you've got all this messy Base64 string inside your CSS, and that's sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. It really comes down to whatever. But yeah, that's kind of that.
Sorry, on a side note, with SVG, they actually have a pattern feature.
I'm sure they do. Yeah, no, I'm sure they do. I just didn't want to spend too much time on it. The real thing I want to do with you guys before we go today is this quotation. So we'll set this up. In this case, I've got this image here. So what I might do, because we don't actually have this image, I'm just going to trace it. Give it a border radius. Set that color to something else later. Remove the fill. And right. See if I can. I'm just trying to get this shape kind of rough shape. Whatever. You guys can find some quotation ones. Yeah, that'll do. Let's just stick with that. And then we'll copy this. So we've got two of them. Move them over a bit. Yeah. So we'll just go copy as SVG. And we'll just paste them in here. Technically these should have like a little gradient on them as well. I'm just gonna turn that stroke into the variables that you saw here. And then I'm actually just going to use this, remove the width and height. I'm just going to grab this and paste it straight in. And replace that image. There you go. So we go into our HTML. You should see this guy here. All right, we'll just resize that. So under our block quote, SVG, we'll just say height 1 rem. It's too small. Set height 2 rem. Yep. So you can see that there. And that stroke width, we might increase that stroke width. We can do that from CSS. So we'll say path stroke width 2, just to increase that a little bit. That's a little bit too much. So we'll say 1.5. Yeah, that's good. Now we've got the text. The text is italic, I believe. Right. So so font style italic. Right, so we've got the italic font there. We've got this Francis Chandler is the heavy text. We might even use a strong. What's our HTML for this? We've got probably wrap her in something, so we'll just wrap that in a span. So we can target it in CSS. So span, color black or 900. Give it a font weight bold. All right. And then what else? Get that profile image. So this, we lost that. So the image profile, I'm actually just going to go to use a random API, like API.random user.me. And that should give me some kind of profile picture that I'm just going to use. So use this random link. This person, the thumbnail. So grab that. And then use that as the source. Alts equals Francis Chandler. All right, make sure you always add alt tags. Cool, so we'll get this little, let's go here. I'm going to go image, border radius. Now this is where we use the 50%. That will turn it into the circle, like that. It also has a border white, about 2 pixels. Solid. Don't know if you can see that. I'm also going to have a little drop shadow, the box shadow, sorry. 0, 0, 1 rem, 1 rem, do that 900 color. See what that looks like. Far too much. We'll say 0.2. And we'll also go in SAS. You can do this really cool function where you actually take a color that already exists, and then you can just go RGBA and set the opacity. So in this case, it's going to be 0.2 for 20%. And that will just add. I think you guys can see that it's just that slight radius, that drop shadow on that. Just gives it that little pop, which is what we want. So we've also got this other image. Must be the old one that we had. There it is. So I'll remove that. Cool. Now, what's the width on this?
Andrew says he has to leave in a minute. Great stuff today. Can't wait for next week.
Okay. No worries. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for coming. We're just about finished up, so I'm just doing this last part, but thanks for coming. Say width 24 rem. Right, and then we'll set that to line height, fix that line height on the P. Line height, say 1.5. Yep. And then we'll do position absolute on this. We'll set it to the right 0. We'll say bottom 20%. Cool. And then I think we also need to add a position relative on the title, just to wrap that. And also on the, sorry, not on the title, on the wrapper. Cool. We have to fix up that shape, set that to top 0. What else? So we're going to add that picture back up the top, the SVG that we created. We want that to be before the paragraph. Give it a little margin at the bottom. margin bottom, say 2-1. Right. Also with this picture, this footer, and the paragraph needs a margin bottom, also the 2-rem. And then the image, this is probably one of the few cases I'll use a float left. There's probably a better ways to do that, but just gonna go quick and dirty for now. No, fuck it. We'll do the right way. On the footer itself, I'm going to go display flex. Yep. And then we're going to have the wrap. So in this case, I'm actually going to group these guys together because we want them to be on the same line. Same line as the image itself. So in here, I'm just going to go .text. And then also potentially add a BR or display block. So there's a display flex on the footer. Then the span is going to have display block to force that thing onto the new line. Yep. Then the footer, we're going to go align item center. And the image will go margin right 1R. And on the span, we'll just go margin bottom 0.5R. Bottom. And there we go. That's it, team. That's all for today. Oh, we've got a lot more to do, right? With the cards that we'll get to, and the buttons, and the other images, and obviously this bottom section too. But this is kind of where we're at for today. As you can see, you know, we're actually getting pretty close to. I can just toggle between these guys. We're not far off. We've got some font. We probably need to bring this font size down a little bit. Got to add these colors. Add a little bit more padding to the button. Right. This probably needs to be changed a little bit because it looks a little heavy. All right. But overall, it's looking pretty good. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it looks good.
Really cool.
Yeah. It's starting to look like the site that we're supposed to make. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this useful to see me break down visual stuff like this and see how I go through the process of CSS?
Yeah, especially like so many properties wasn't aware of like how you could use. So that's cool.
Yep. Well, great. Oh, I'm glad it's helping. Yeah, I love doing this stuff. This used to be my day job. So, you know, taking these pictures and turning them into code as quickly as possible. Even junior web developer jobs and stuff and whatnot, they actually test you on this. That's pretty common for a junior web dev test. Is that they take some HTML and CSS and say, hey, turn this in the next hour, turn this into a website. And it's obviously impossible, right? But they want to see how far you can get. So, yeah. Cool. Well, I'm gonna open it up to questions. If there's anything that you want to cover around this, otherwise we'll just hang out and do more social stuff. But is there any questions we've covered on anything we've covered today, or any questions on CSS, how we did any particular style, how you'd go about this in your own projects.
How would you personally give the space between contact and login in the header?
The contact and login.
Yeah.
So you're saying fixing it up so we have the like it is in the design, or this is centered and that's on the side.
Yeah, just curious, like how you would do it.
Yeah. If you wanted it to be exact, like someone's going to say something.
Yeah, Tristan, I was thinking like if we can wrap this login and get started in a div, and then if we use something like margin left or padding left.
Not exactly. See, the thing is you want this to be centered exactly. So they actually almost have to be two different layers.
I see.
For it to work.
Like, okay.
Another one is to somehow set this to flex. Set this to the right, on the hard right somehow, and then have like a space in between. Another option is to add a margin left to this, and just have them split up, but just add a margin on the left side.
Yeah.
Or maybe try using
I find it
grid, like a div on the left and then another column, and then a third column.
No.
Get started.
No, so the reason why we can't do that is because this has to be centered.
I think we can use position absolute.
We could, but as soon as you do that, it takes it out of flow. And when you start resizing the browser, you start getting to some pretty awful issues with responsiveness. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. What you could do is you could set this to display flex, right? Let me add my little helpers back in. So what you could do is you could set display flex on the header, right? And you actually have two main containers. You have this part here, which actually will extend out. I'm gonna delete all these things because they're annoying you now. So if we have the header, right? Why can't I do default styling in this? So say we have this, but then we also we break this into two. So this is one, and then the other one is this one here. Now this one we set flex grow to 0, right? So it doesn't expand. And you can actually see here, this is actually kind of centered, not in the actual center of the page, but it's actually kind of centered to the second container. So then what you can do is in this container, right, you just say text align center and have all these as display inline block. So that's another potential solution. You guys see what I'm saying with this?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's another potential way of doing it. This designer, I don't think, was putting through the most care in what he was doing. It's just like spelling errors and the margins are kind of all over the place. So I don't think this is exact. I think he probably just pixel pushed it.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah. A good question. What other questions have we got? What are you guys thinking? Penny, for your thoughts. Wow, nobody's thinking anything. That's cool. Well, why don't we stop the webinar for today? Thanks, Frankie.
Sure.
And head on into more fun time. Social time.